Good evening and welcome to the February 21st meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals. We'll be calling this meeting to order. First, I'll ask you to all please silence your cell phones, and I'll introduce the board at this time. To my far right is Jerry Patamas. He is an associate member of the board. My name is Terrence Hurry. I'm the chairman of the board. To my left is Ed Van Kuren, who is a full voting member, followed by Bob Dugan, who is another associate member. With us tonight is also Noreen Stockman, who is the zoning administrator, and Joe Robbins, who is our recording secretary. The Zoning Board of Appeals is charged with applying the zoning bylaws for the town of Falmouth and considers requests for special permits, variances, and appeals as provided in the town bylaws, which have been approved by town meeting and the Attorney General's office for the Commonwealth. All decisions are made through the public hearing process. The board's goal is to hear testimony from the applicants and the public, and also to allow a full and fair discussion of the project prior to rendering a decision. To begin each hearing, the clerk will read the public announcement of the hearing and present any pertinent information from the file, such as referrals from town departments and summarizing correspondences to and from the board. The applicant or the applicant's representative will then have 15 minutes to make a presentation, and time may be extended by vote of the board. The board will then ask questions to the applicant, and then the public will have an opportunity to comment. Public comments should be directed only at the project, and I also please ask you to please refrain from making any personal or derogatory statements. These comments can include an opinion in favor or opposition, or it just might simply be a question about the nature of the project, and the chair will limit discussion in the interest of time if comments become repetitive. All members of the public wishing to speak should wait to be recognized by the chair and should come to the podium to my right, and I ask you to please state your name and address for the record. And typically, public comment is limited to two minutes per person. We will then either close or continue the hearing when the board is satisfied that enough information has been presented by testimony and in the file to make a decision. By motion and vote of the board, the hearing will be closed. In the alternative, the board may continue the hearing to a future date and time certain. After the hearing is closed, no more testimony can be taken. The board may further then discuss the project among ourselves and make a motion to either deny or approve will be made and voted upon. The motion will include a summary of key findings and conditions. An affirmative vote of 4 members, which is a supermajority, is required for approval of motions on special permits, variances, and appeals. A split vote, such as a 3-2 vote, is a failure to carry and would result in denial of the project. Under Massachusetts general law, if a special permit is denied, the applicant cannot return to the board for 2 years unless the project is substantially different than what was already presented. And turning to our agenda items for tonight, we have executive session scheduled for 6:30. We also have a continuation, 2 new hearings, and open meeting agenda items. So we do have executive session scheduled first at 6:30. Would anyone like to make a motion to that effect?
Yeah, I'd like to move that the board enter into an executive session to discuss settlement of the pending litigation, DiPietro versus Falmouth Zoning Board of Appeals. And an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the board's litigation position. The board will reconvene in open session.
Second.
Okay, motion was made by Jerry and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
I think we have to take a roll call if I'm not
I'm
sure.
sorry, it is a roll call vote. Jerry, you want to start us off?
Aye, Jerry Patamas.
Aye, Terrence Hurry.
Aye, Ed Van Kuren.
Hi, Robert Dugan.
Okay, so the board's voted to enter into executive session. We'll ask everyone to please exit the room. We'll have the door closed while we discuss this matter, and we will reconvene into open session when we're done. Thank you. everyone, and thank you for your patience during our executive session. We'll start right back up with the continuation that was scheduled for 6:30. That would be application 118-18, Blue Flag Development LLC, 836 Palmer Ave in Falmouth. And I believe we need to read everything into the record, because I don't think that was done last time with continuation.
I wasn't here, but, okay. Being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11 of the Chapter 40A of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that Blue Flag Development LLC of Boston, Mass. Applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit pursuant to Sections 240-33H, 243C, 240-109B, and 240-101 of the Code of Falmouth to update existing campsite, reducing the number of campsites from 122 to 108, Airstream rental trailers and tents, 10 tents, remove nearly all existing campsites, reduce the number of campsites from 122 to 108, and 10 tents, remove nearly all existing structures and replace with clubhouse on subject property known as 836 Palmer Avenue, Falmouth, Mass. Comments from the Conservation Commission. Conservation staff met with representatives to review septic location. We are waiting on comments from Scott from DPW. Engineering. Blue Flag will be filing an NOI with the Comcom soon. Planning board review is 2 pages of detail. Fire prevention. For Massachusetts fire prevention laws, Mass General Laws, Chapter 148, whereas the proposed clubhouse is over 7,500 square feet, the building will be required to have an automatic fire sprinkler system and an automatic fire detection. It will require emergency after hours access to buildings. Board of Health, applicant shall meet with Board of Health to discuss septic design project. Not approved yet, as it was preliminary meeting to discuss design. Currently less than 10,000 gallons per day. So under local authority, if they exceed 10,000 gallons per day, they must obtain a groundwater storage permit from the HADEP. And planning, I believe there's a meeting scheduled for Tuesday. The comments, there's 9 with concerns, 1 in support, and opposition of 2. And that's it.
Okay. And you might notice we went from 4 to 5 members during executive session. I just want to introduce Ken Foreman. He is our vice chairman. He made it just in time for executive session, not to throw him under the bus or anything, but we're at 5 members, which is a great thing. Also, for the purposes of tonight, I want to appoint Ed Van Kuren as the clerk, and just note that Bob and Jerry, they're associate members, and they are appointed as full voting members for tonight's hearings. And with us tonight for the applicant.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the record, my name is Eliza Cox. I'm an attorney with Nutter, McLennan & Fish in Hyannis on behalf of the applicant, Blue Flag Development, LLC. Joining me this evening on behalf of our team from Blue Flag is Brad Guidi, Terry Sanford, Jason Brown, and Tyler Hardy. Our engineer, Brendan Mullaney from Bracken Engineering is here, and my colleague, Attorney Jeannie Campus, is also here tonight. Mr. Chairman, I know you generally allocate 15 minutes. I have 16 slides. I think it's going to take me just about 20 minutes, so I would like to ask permission from the board to exceed the 15-minute time limit.
If you want, we can take care of that right now. Applicants,
I would move that we allow the applicant to go for 20 minutes.
Second.
okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
Unanimous.
Thank you
20
very
minutes.
much. So the property that's the subject of this application is 836 Palmer Avenue. It's owned by the Tessier Family Nominee Trust. We did submit communication as part of the application confirming that Blue Flag has the authority to file this application seeking special permit relief. This slide shows the existing conditions on the property, just to orient you, and I know many of you were at the site visit. Palmer Avenue is to the east, the Shining Sea Bike Path is to the west. The property contains about 12.7 acres of land. It's in the public use zoning district. It's not in a zone 2, it's not in an historic district, it's not mapped by natural heritage for any rare and endangered species. There is one wetland located on the site in this location. If you were on the site visit, you probably noticed that there's a pretty significant topographic changes on the property. At the high point, the topography is at about elevation 78. At the low point down by the wetland, it's about at elevation 8, so there's a change of about 70 feet on the property. As I think everyone is familiar, the property is the home of the Sippawisset Campground and Cabins, which is a campground that's been operating on this property since about the 1920s. The existing conditions has accommodations for 122 campsites, which are shown on this graphic. These consist of camper trailers, which are the rectangular darker blue notes on the plan, cabins, which are shown in yellow, and tent sites, which are shown in light blue on the plan. In addition, there are also other numerous structures on the property, including 2 year-round residences, an office, shed, and bathroom facilities. In total, the gross square footage of all existing structures is just under 11,000 square feet. This slide shows some photographs of the various camping activities on the property under the current operation. So the campground's been around for a long time, over 100 years, and it predates the adoption of zoning. The first zoning map in Falmouth was created in 1925 and noted this property, 12.7 acres, as Charlotte E. Dodge, who was a former owner. At the time, the campground was called the Charlotte Crest Campgrounds. And in the first zoning map created in Falmouth, this was actually an industrial zoning district. The current owners have a wealth of wonderful information about the history of this property and the campground uses, including photos, letters, newspaper articles, all documenting the use, including back into the 1920s. This photo that's in there, it's actually a postcard that they've collected, is estimated to be circa 1927, 1928, but shows campground operations on the property. So proposed conditions. My clients want to continue the use of the property as a campground, but are proposing significant improvements to the property, resulting in a development that we believe is more sensitive to the environment and also to the surrounding neighborhood. 108 total campsites are proposed. They're shown on this graphic. They consist of 98 Airstream trailers and 10 tents. The tent sites are roughly right here, and the rest of the graphics that you see are Airstream trailers. In general, the campsites are proposed in roughly the same location as the existing campsites, and this was done very purposefully in an attempt to minimize the amount of disturbance and clearing that would be required in connection with their use. My clients have instructed their design professionals, the architect and the engineer, to really do what they can to minimize the clearing, minimize the grading wherever possible. It's really within everyone's interest to preserve the natural and scenic beauty of the property and enhance that, which is part of our proposal. There are 3 buildings that are proposed in place of all the existing structures. One is the main clubhouse, which is roughly in the center of the property. There's a maintenance building that's located in the southeast corner of the property. and then a bicycle shed that also will have the infrastructure for the wastewater treatment facility close to the connection to the Shining Sea bike path over here. As you can see, there's a new parking area that's proposed. It will consist of 135 parking spaces. We submitted earlier this week a revised landscape plan that shows continuation of the fencing all along Palmer Avenue, as well as significant landscaping along Palmer Avenue, and then continuation or construction of new fencing all along the north side of the property, as well as significant buffering along that property. In terms of the parking spaces, they're proposed to be a pervious surface to allow for better infiltration. That is one of the things that we are seeking zoning relief from you all, is to allow for that pervious surface. The parking spaces, as you can see, have been distributed on the site, so it's not one large parking mass. And the idea is when you're coming into the site, you will come into the curb cut, which is roughly in the same location as currently exists. Drive up to the clubhouse where there's a turnaround area where you will check in, get your campsite. Typically campers have a lot of gear, so you can drop off your gear at the clubhouse, and then there are golf carts to take you to your campsite if you can't carry the gear, and then drive back and park in the parking lot. Unlike existing conditions, the intention is to keep the cars away from the campers. So currently you drive to your campsite and then you drive throughout the property. Here, the idea is to keep the cars in one area and reduce the amount of conflict between pedestrians and cars, and keep the cars away from the camping operations, which we think will enhance public safety. We did, and this plan reflects it, make a change to the parking lot in response to comments that we heard from at the planning board hearing. Originally, with the plans that we filed, there were four parking spaces proposed in this location. Those have been relocated to allow for a larger buffer between the parking area and the abutting properties. And that's reflected on the revised landscape plan that has been submitted to the board. Most of the parking spaces, as I mentioned, are a pervious surface. The main driveway will be paved. In addition, there are some of the paths that intertwine throughout the site will be paved, the ones that provide ADA-compliant paths to the ADA-compliant campsites. Otherwise, the paths throughout the site will also be a pervious material. In addition, the site will also, as with existing conditions, maintain a connection to the bike path. This shows photographs of what the Airstream trailers will look like, as well as what the tent sites will look like, just to give you a visual. And here's an interior of the Airstream trailers. They're generally designed for 2 adults. There is a futon that opens if you have children, that they can sleep on the futon. So this slide shows a graphic of the elevation of the proposed clubhouse building. So the clubhouse will have the check-in area. There'll be a lounge space. There's no restaurant, there's no bar, but there is a sort of a space for campers to enjoy the building. There will be bathrooms with showers so that the people who are staying in the tents will have a place to use the restroom and take showers. There's a second floor lounge space. There will be a very small retail area that will sell convenience items to the campers, and then there's outdoor deck space. The clubhouse is for use by the campground patrons only. The project complies with all of the dimensional requirements of the public use zoning district. I just wanted to highlight a few of them. This slide shows the requirements and proposed conditions. So building coverage, 40% is allowed, only 3.7% is proposed. Lot coverage, 70% is allowed, only 9% is proposed. In terms of the relief that we're requesting, there's 3 special permits that have been sought. One is for the use, and we have filed in the alternative. So either one of 1A or 1B would be allow for this project to move forward. So we have filed for a special permit use as a campground, which is an allowed use in this zoning district. Reading some of the public correspondence, I think there may have been some confusion about that. The public use zoning district allows a whole host of uses, including campgrounds. In addition, we've also applied in the alternative for special permit relief to alter a pre-existing non-conforming use. It is a campground. It will continue to be a campground. Secondly, we've applied for a special permit, as I mentioned previously, for the permeable parking spaces. And then finally, a special permit if it's determined needed from the COPD, the Coastal Overlay Protection District, Coastal Pond Overlay Protection District. So in terms of the use, we showed a graphic earlier. The campsite use has existed on this site for over 100 years, almost 100 years now. When we first looked at this case, we did consider whether or not a special permit would even be needed for the proposed changes. You may be familiar with the Powers v. Building Inspector of Barnstable case, which is kind of the seminal case in terms of when you have a non-conforming use, whether those changes require zoning relief. And if you are familiar with that case and its progeny, there are cases that find that improvements to and modernizing a facility is not a change of use, doesn't require zoning relief. Going from seasonal to year-round does not require zoning relief. But in the interest of transparency, my clients did not ask the building commissioner to determine whether or not use relief was required. Rather, we've just filed for a special permit as a campground use. The use, as I mentioned, is allowed by special permit in this zoning district, and it's, we believe, less intense than what exists right now on the site and less intense than other uses that are allowed within the public use zoning district. And speaking of intensity, so this slide compares existing impacts versus proposed impacts, and we think demonstrates quite clearly that what's proposed will be a less intense use than what currently exists. So the overall use as a campground will remain. However, it will be less dense. There are 14 less campsites proposed under proposed conditions than existing conditions. The wastewater treatment will be significantly improved. Right now, under current conditions, the site is served by, I think I heard somewhere between around 11 cesspools and septic systems. All of those will be abandoned, and a single innovative alternative wastewater treatment facility will be constructed. That wastewater treatment facility will have denitrification components, so the nitrogen concentration comparing existing to proposed will be reduced significantly by about 9 parts per million. We've calculated under existing conditions, the nitrogen concentration is about 15.47 parts per million. Under proposed conditions with the denitrification system, it will go down to about 6.34 parts per million, a significant benefit to the environment. Stormwater management and treatment will be greatly improved. Right now, there's virtually none, and there will be a up-to-date stormwater management system that's consistent with DEP requirements for these types of redevelopment projects. All runoff will be retained and infiltrated on the site. We submitted with the application materials a memorandum from a traffic engineer who analyzed existing versus proposed trip generation under ITE. And he determined that with the reduction in campsites, there will also be a reduction in the number of vehicle trips. In the peak hours, it will be between 3 to 4, and in the daily, it'll be a reduction of somewhere between 36 to 46, depending on if weekday or Saturday. Improved screening, there are new fences proposed. There's a tremendous amount of new landscaping proposed along the borders and within the parking area. One thing I would just note that the landscape plan that we submitted to the board earlier this week shows the landscaping that's proposed along the property boundaries, but doesn't show, in addition, all the landscaping that's going to be proposed within the site. So within each campsite, additional landscaping will be proposed to provide privacy to the campers within the campground itself. ADA accessibility. Right now, the site is not ADA accessible. It will be under proposed conditions. There will be ADA accessible parking. The clubhouse will be accessible. Walkways to the ADA trailers will be accessible, and there will be ADA accessible trailers. Improve public safety. There's communication from the fire department confirming that there's adequate access throughout the site. Taking the cars away from the pedestrians and the campers, I think, is a significant public safety improvement. A new water main is also proposed to loop through the site, so the utilities will be significantly improved as well. So we suggest that in terms of the use, the special permit criteria is met. The lot is adequately sized. It's almost 13 acres. It's suitable for the use. It's zoned for this type of use by special permit. This use has existed on the site for almost 100 years. There's reduced traffic and improved safety. The visual impacts will be minimized compared to existing and with the additional improvements that my clients are proposing. Significantly improved sewage disposal, drainage, and utilities. There's no impact on affordable housing. And then the general standard, the adverse effects do not overbalance the beneficial. And I think as the last slide really demonstrated, we actually think there will be substantial beneficial effects with this redevelopment. So the second special permit is for the permeable parking surfaces. The board has the authority under the zoning bylaw to allow for other parking services besides concrete, asphalt. And so what we're asking for is a relief from that requirement by special permit. Having a permeable parking area will reduce drainage, reduce the runoff. We think it's appropriate given the use. This isn't a shopping center where people are coming in and out and putting high traffic volumes on the parking areas. Generally, they come, they go to their campsite, and they enjoy the property and the area. In addition, I think it minimizes the impact on the a neighborhood with a more natural surface and is more in keeping with the vision of having this be a beautiful natural site for the campers themselves. Finally, the Coastal Pond Overlay District. It wasn't clear if this was needed. We did talk to the building commissioner, and he pretty much suggested that we apply for this special permit. It is not within the coast. This property is not within the Coastal Pond Overlay District. It's not within the map, but it is a special permit use within 1,000 feet of the marsh, the Little Sippawisset Marsh. So it wasn't clear whether or not a special permit was needed. We filed for it. We believe that a special permit may be appropriately granted by the board because there is a significant decrease, not only not an increase, but a significant decrease in nitrogen loading. I've gone through the concentrations again. They're on the screen to my left. This isn't our only stop here in town. So as was mentioned in reading the comments, the project is pending before the planning board for site plan review. At the initial hearing, we had one public hearing with the planning board. We received some comments regarding wanting us to look carefully at the landscaping and screening. My clients have had site visits, they've had numerous phone calls, they've met with neighbors, they've emailed with neighbors, and we've made significant changes to the fencing and the landscaping, including relocating those parking spaces, changing the parking lot lighting as reflected on the revised landscape plan, all in an attempt to be a really good neighbor, which is what they want to do. The project will require a notice of intent with the Conservation Commission for work within the 100-foot buffer. It is a disturbed buffer right now. We're actually going to be pulling development outside of the 50-foot buffer, so that's going to be an improvement. And we've just come up with, which we'll be filing with the Conservation Commission, a plan to improve the wetland resource, a restoration plan for the wetland. And then finally, the wastewater treatment system will be requiring approval by the Board of Health. We have met informally with them, and we're meeting formally with them next week. So last slide, some benefits to the neighborhood, and this is not intended to be an exhaustive list. I think there are other benefits as well. One, continue the campground use that's existed on the site for so long, reducing the total number of accommodations, making it a less dense use than what currently exists. In addition, it's significantly, I think, so it's less intense in terms of the impact as compared to existing. It's also less intense as compared to other uses which are permissible in the public use zoning district. The proposal preserves and enhances the natural beauty of the site. It improves the environment. It reduces impact to the wetland. And finally, this is one of those unique cases where I think neighbors and the applicant really share the same goal. And that is a quiet, peaceful, beautiful, tranquil site where the campers can look up and see the stars, neighbors can see the stars. Really, the uses and their vision for the site in terms of creating a green, beautiful location are aligned. So that's our presentation. We're happy to answer any questions that the board may have, and we appreciate you coming out and seeing the site and listening to us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was just a couple of seconds under 19 minutes.
Excellent.
So good job estimating
Thank
there. Just for clarification, the planning board hearing is still open. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
It's case by case, I guess you could say. Sometimes we hold off on board comments and questions if the planning board hearing is still open, but how does the board feel about that? They haven't completed site plan review with the planning board yet.
Well, if we're gonna move, I think generally we would move to continue it anyways, because we have to go to
Right,
Concom.
Right.
So I mean,
So maybe just go over some basic questions if we have.
Sure. All right, so we'll do that. We'll open up with basic questions of the project. Bob, do you want to start us off?
So on the On the seasonal permit, so is this gonna be seasonal? Like currently it's May 15th, October 15th, or you?
No, we're not proposing it to be a seasonal use. I think, the season is probably gonna dictate demand, but we're asking not to have it be restricted seasonally.
Okay, and then it did say that patrons would be limited to 2 per unit, is,
No, it's not limited to 2 per unit. So the Airstreams are generally designed for 2 adults, but there is the ability for children, and there's a futon, as I think I showed you in one of the slides, so others could sleep there too.
on the site visit, I questioned, on some of the fencing, I guess on the Saconaset side, and there was a mention that there may be a proposal to tie into neighboring fences.
Right.
Is that still something that's under consideration?
Yes, so we did submit, I don't know if you have it, we did submit a revised landscape plan that shows the fencing, the proposed fencing, and it does show an 8-foot fence along that northerly property line that would tie into existing fencing.
So does any of that go over any of the easements that are shown on the plan?
It's
or-
all on the subject property.
Okay, so everything's on the subject property, so you're not tying into the,
Well, some of the existing fences are actually on this property, on the campground property. So all of it will be on our property.
but
We're
it
not
will be,
asking for
okay.
any easements to go on anyone else's property.
and then just some basic things on, I guess, hours of operation, or do you have quiet hours, or what's the,
Maybe I'll ask-
business plan?
I'll ask someone from Blue Flag to come up and respond to that question. This is Jason Brown.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the time tonight. Yeah, again, the hours of operation generally range, somewhere between early morning hours to late evening, and then the campground provides for, again, a tranquil environment at night. We don't have any specifics on exactly what those hours would be, but it's in everybody's best interest to, do similarly to what they do in Russian River, where the auto camp is now, where basically 10 p.m. on to 6 a.m. in the morning is quiet hours.
And when you actually, start doing a development like this, what do you see as construction hours?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll have Brad come up and answer that one.
Hi, Brad Guidi with Blue Flag Development. Obviously, Falmouth has regulations on construction, so we're going to be respectful of that and also respectful to our neighbors. Typically, we build in very close-knit communities. We do a lot of work in Nantucket, so we're used to working with neighbors. I would say construction hours generally are 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then no construction on Sundays and limited on Saturdays.
And on the permeable surface, do you have one that's proposed now, or do you know what?
Yeah, so I think we're talking about a crushed bluestone for the parking. And then the paths would most likely be like a compacted pea gravel, which is a little softer on the feet.
And any plans for any kind of traffic mitigation during construction? I assume you're going to have to be bringing a lot of.
Yeah, so it's an interesting site because the scale of the site is a lot of site work is really where most of the work is being done. And as you know, with site work, you bring your machinery onto the site and then it stays. So in terms of traffic, bringing the machines on, you'll have a couple days of that, but the machines going on and off the site every day certainly won't happen. The clubhouse itself is of residential scale. So, we're talking similar to building a large house in terms of the equipment needed.
And where I haven't looked at the new landscape plan on that area to the north, I know on the site plan they were gonna keep the fence that's there, which is I think a wire fence. Is that still remaining, or are you planning a solid fence
On the area
that
to
side?
the south.
Yeah, it must be to the south, yeah.
Yeah.
The undeveloped portion.
The undeveloped, no, so we're not showing a fence there. We're showing a fence to the area to the north, as well as a 6-foot fence all along Palmer Avenue, and then a lot of landscaping on both sides of the fence on Palmer and along our side of the fence on the north.
Right, that's all I have.
Ed, any questions?
How many sites have been developed like this?
This is going to be the first one on the East Coast. So right now, the operator currently has a site in Santa Barbara, in Russian River, which is essentially Napa, and in a month from now, they're going to be opening one in Yosemite. So you'll be in good company in terms of your the sites. But this is the first one on the East Coast.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Ken, any questions?
Yeah, is there a resident on-site manager?
Yeah, so there will be, that's actually something that we were talking about right before we came. There will someone always be accessible 24 hours a day. In terms of residents on-site manager, their current site in Santa Barbara has 30 campers, 30 units. The one in Yosemite is similar to this. It has 100. So in terms of operations, I can't speak exactly to that, but there will always be someone 24 hours a day accessible.
Yeah, I just point out Yosemite, obviously, national park, they have
Yep.
rangers and so forth. My concern is
Yep.
if there is an issue in the, great to have quiet hours, but if
Sure.
someone decides to have a party at 11 o'clock,
Yeah.
who do the neighbors call?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and again, we've hopefully addressed this with some of the neighbors. We're happy to address it now. So to clarify first on Yosemite, that is a private site outside of the park itself, very similar to the way that this works in the residential neighborhood. Same with their Russian River site, same with Santa Barbara. So all of the existing sites are in residential neighborhoods. So it won't be the first time that we do the same here. The way that the operations work is that we have staffing that, is on various levels. We have a general manager that's usually on site during regular hours, and always someone that's available 24 hours a day to be reached if there was some disturbance on the site. So the clubhouse, again, is a gathering space. There's not a bar, there's not a restaurant. It would be very unlikely that there would be some big party, but if there was, then that would be something that we would address immediately. And we would be as concerned as the neighbors hopefully would be.
And I guess that you mentioned don't expect it to be seasonal. Does that mean you expect it to operate fully year-round?
Depends what your definition of fully means. I mean, look,
There is a need for housing in Falmouth. and
Sure.
It's entirely conceivable to me that this will be relatively affordable housing. If you were stuck in the middle of winter with no place to live, an Airstream trailer would be a pretty desirable spot.
yeah, I appreciate the question. It's not currently designed as that use. It's designed, as full year use on a kind of leisure basis, if you will. I think the seasonality will depend on how much demand we get. We anticipate, just given what we've seen in other locations and other sites, and just generally what's going on in Falmouth and Woods Hole, that there's actually going to be some nice demand for us and for the product in what would traditionally be the shoulder season. So I can't answer you definitively what that's going to look like. We are believers in that, and we'd like to help, kind of again, provide that offering for everybody who's either in town or is at town. But it's not currently, anticipated that we would open it up for affordable housing.
Okay. And then I presume that if I want to rent an Airstream trailer in December, it's going to cost me a little less than it might in June.
Yes, absolutely. And again, we've had this question come up, so I appreciate you bringing up the question of pricing. I think there's two ways that we presented and that we think about this. One, in terms of pricing, it changes, based on demand and based on what season you're in and based on what day you're in, just like the airlines would.
Oh, great.
And that's how this will be priced. We are very cognizant that we want this site to be approachable, not only from all the ADA upgrades that Eliza talked about that really don't happen on campgrounds today, so an accessible person has a very difficult time getting onto a campsite. We've actually gone out and are building our own proprietary ADA camper units, as well as making everything else accessible. That goes for pricing too. That's why we have the tents there. That's why seasonally the price will change. So it'll absolutely be lower pricing in the middle of December than it will be in the peak season in the middle of summer.
And if you are using this in the winter, provision for plowing, how
Yes.
does that work?
Yeah, so again, we envision, and then that maintenance shed that we'll have the ability and we'll work locally with somebody to plow and to make sure that the site, is meeting safety standards for anybody who's walking the pedestrian part of it or driving into the parking lot.
And I guess my last question is trash.
Sure. I mean,
What can you tell me about it?
what would you like to know?
It would be private.
It'll be private trash.
So I didn't notice if there were like dumpster
There,
locations.
there are dumpsters by the maintenance shed.
Okay.
Yeah, building.
How do people get those from their, you trusting them to march over there?
Yeah,
from-
that's a really good question. And again, just to clarify, the idea here is that these Airstream trailers will have, and along with the clubhouse, kind of everything you need to go camping. So you show up, you don't really need to bring anything but a change of clothes, and that's very unlike the way that the site works today or traditional camping if you had a camper trailer. So there are trash receptacles in the Airstreams themselves. There's normal trash receptacles in the clubhouse. Our staff will go and clean that during everyone's stays, and
There
then
is staffing.
there's
to-
staffing and housekeeping to clean the trailers when people check out.
Within the clubhouse building, the top half of the whole clubhouse building is housekeeping, laundry facilities on site.
When they check out. But what if they stay for 3 weeks?
It's up to you. You can request it, and we'll provide housekeeping.
That might do it for the moment for me.
Jerry, any questions?
With the pervious pavement, I'm sure that newer construction standards to make sure that, someone doesn't go back and forth with a dump truck, and although you have crushed bluestone up above, it's consolidated. Do you have special designs for this, where you work with the town engineer? I'm not sure how the construction would be altered, but you don't want to pack that and do away with it.
Yeah, of course.
That's just,
Yeah, I mean, look, all the plans obviously have to go through the town engineer, and there's gonna be certain standards that need to be met. I can tell you, and Brendan, you could speak to this, probably better than I. This is Brendan with Bracken Engineering.
Sure. Brendan Mullaney from Bracken Engineering. We're doing the civil engineering on the project. For terms of our stormwater calculations, the town engineer actually requested that we consider all the pervious areas as impervious to do our figures, even though we presume that water will infiltrate and go down into the ground through these. In order to properly size the stormwater facilities, catch basins, leaching areas, et cetera, we made the presumption basically that these were pavement. And that was at his request, because there is, sometimes if it is compacted too much, there is potential runoff. So we are handling all runoff on site, and those calculations will all be reviewed by the town engineer.
and the other thing is, you have not met with the Board of Health yet, so you don't quite know what their performance standard's gonna be for your septic tank. I know you have a number up there. Is that a number you're proposing to them, or you're gonna propose a system to them? Are you gonna propose, and I'm picking these as suggestions, a maintenance plan? They're gonna be coming up with an enforcement policy within about a month that will say, if you don't meet performance standards, how are you gonna fix it? So, the only thing I was really interested in, how did you determine that standard? And what system you're using, if you know?
Yes, sure. So we've met informally with the Board of Health back in October to review preliminarily what they would be requiring in terms of nitrogen loading coming from the site. We worked with Stantec, who is a wastewater consultant. They've done a lot of the larger plants and larger size on-site septic systems on the Cape and surrounding area. We are meeting with them Monday night to formally review and request approval of the system. The system is an Amphidrome system, which is a biologically active filter. It's one of the most advanced treatment systems that you can use at this size of gallons per day. The system is sized for about 9,900 gallons per day. That will be treated. Nitrogen removal is incorporated into the design, and all of the wastewater will be pumped back up to the northeast corner of the site, where it will be infiltrated through a Presby Envirotech system, which was developed in New Hampshire and is a passive type leach field that we are utilizing to provide that treatment up in that center. So we've met with them informally, as I said, and got their input on this, and we did our design based on that input.
So you could, I guess, I know what you're saying, and we don't have the authority here. Is it 9? Is it gonna be 8? Is it gonna be 10?
They provided guidance.
Oh, okay, they did, okay. And they also provided guidance on seasonality of the flow, that the night system could
Correct, yes.
go belly up.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Mhm. And there is we have submitted all the documentation, but there's a full operation and maintenance plan. And any innovative alternative system, you have to have a contract with a licensed inspector that will do annual inspections or twice-a-year inspections of the system.
Thank you. No further questions.
Okay. There was mention about screening in terms of the fencing, but could you elaborate any more to perhaps the landscaping plan? Any natural buffering proposed?
Yeah, there's quite a bit. So let's start with the fencing. It's an 8-foot fence that essentially goes between us and the neighbors on the north. It's a 6-foot fence that goes between us and Palmer Avenue, and it would be a stockade-style fence, so you won't be able to see through it. The landscape plan that was submitted shows an abundance of landscaping on both sides of the Palmer Avenue. We're trying to use trees that'll stay green throughout the year, that'll grow quickly, that'll provide a great deal of screening. And then in the front, we're using some smaller bushes and grasses to kind of soften it up and make it very attractive. There's a gate that is set back from the road that will be closed in the evening. And because of the kind of the natural contours of the land, we walked the site with the neighbors quite extensively and strategically looked where landscaping could be placed. So as you're driving along Palmer, you really wouldn't be able to catch glimpses of the car. So we did our best to capture these moments in the landscaping where as you're driving along Palmer, you wouldn't the chances of seeing the cars would be minimus.
And can you also comment on the existing topography versus what's proposed, changes in elevation, things of that nature?
Sure, Brendan. I mean, yeah, I think Brendan can.
Brendan Mullaney. So the most major changes or the biggest changes will be associated with the septic leach field up in the northeast corner and the parking areas in general, just because they have to be, they have to meet a certain slope criteria, and the system itself will have to be placed at a relatively uniform depth below the surface. So there is some, 2-foot changes in a lot of those areas. The biggest cut, actually, there is a hill, let's see if I can, sort of in this general area right here, that is going to be cut down somewhat significantly. So those are where the major, or at least the largest cuts and or fills will be happening within the parking area in general. The rest of the site is going to remain mostly how it is now. There will be some minor regrading in order to accommodate some of the trailers, but the directive of the applicants and the project proponents was to minimize that to the maximum extent practicable, and that is what has been done by us and also Workshop, who has done a lot of the layout and design on the site.
Could I just while you're up
Sure.
to Brendan, regarding just the wastewater again.
Yep.
So what do you base max occupancy on to figure out the wastewater? If there's more than 2 people per unit, is there a max figure you use per site or?
Sure. So it's based on Title V, and it's per campsite. So 90 gallons per day per campsite, and then some additional flow for incidental use, clubhouse,
So on the
et
90
cetera.
so 90 gallons per day, so how many people does that cover per site?
Well, it's just a general number for a campsite, so for campgrounds. So, in a typical house, you have to have 110 gallons per bedroom. The thought in Title V, my presumption is that, you'd use a little bit less than a typical, inhabitant of a bedroom. But I know the bedroom numbers are based on 2 inhabitants per bedroom originally in Title V. So it's that's the number we use. That's the number we presented to the Board of Health. Typically there's probably more than 2 people staying at a campsite in a typical campground setting, I'd imagine. And so that was the figure that we've moved forward with.
Great, thanks.
And can you comment on I believe it was included with the landscaping plan, the lighting plan, for lack of a better term? Any light pollution?
Yeah, so all the lights we're using are all dark sky compliant. In the parking area, which was a big concern to the neighbors, we've now incorporated bollard lighting as opposed to pole lighting. So all the lighting is low, with the idea that our campers will be using flashlights and lanterns. And again, I think it's important to know that the experience for our campers in terms of light pollution is just as important as it would be for our neighbors.
And assuming all goes well with the local permitting process, what's your actual construction timeline?
That's a great question. We're currently finalizing the structural engineering, and we would be hoping to be breaking ground on the site probably end of this spring, assuming all goes well with permitting. And then and then opening the site the following summer.
Following summer, so not this summer would be the.
No, we wouldn't be able to get it open this summer.
And the Airstreams and the tents, would the Airstreams be there year-round? Do the tents come down during the?
The Airstreams would be there year-round, however, they are on wheels, and they can be pulled off with a truck. The tents will most likely come down during the winter.
And there was mentioned during the initial presentation about coming onto the site, leaving your car in the parking lot, and then potentially getting to your location via golf cart. Does everyone get a golf cart, or
No.
is that?
No, there's I think there's provisions for like 15 golf carts, so not everyone's driving around in golf carts. The campers do, however, get wagons that they can wheel their stuff to their campsite. And then like we said, down in the corner there where the Amphitrome system is housed, that's also become a bicycle storage space where we'll supply bicycles to the people staying on the campground.
And can anyone go over the plans for what's next to the bike rack there, that conservation area, I guess? Can you elaborate what your intentions are with that?
Sure. So we have prepared, we've not yet submitted to Conservation, but we plan to. They have a filing deadline next week. We're going to prepare or propose a full-scale restoration of the wetland area, which is going to include the removal of all the invasive and nuisance vegetation. If you've been on the site, you've probably seen that it is quite overgrown. Has not been really managed and has been overtaken by a combination of invasive vegetation. We have engaged Blue Flax, not Blue Flag, but it's a landscape restoration design firm from Down Cape. I believe they've been in front of the Falmouth Conservation Commission a number of times, and they have prepared a restoration and land management plan to remove that invasive vegetation and basically restore that wetland with native species that will provide enhanced habitat value. We're also proposing to do substantial drainage improvements adjacent to the wetland that will include a rain garden close by that will filter and infiltrate a lot of the stormwater and clean it up before it actually gets back into the groundwater and feeds the wetland again. So I think it'll be a very distinctive and a noticeable site feature, especially, not only for folks staying on the site, but if you're riding down the bike path, you'll be able to see this, really nice site enhancement where right now, it basically looks kind of like a overgrown, viney, jungly type area that, hasn't been maintained for a while. So that's our intent.
And I just wanted to get this on the record for tonight. The existing structure known as the birdhouse, that'll be remaining?
Yes. And if you can figure out a use for it, we're open to suggestions.
I'll leave that to you guys, the experts. How's that? Great. That just about does it for me. Does anyone else have any other follow-up questions from the board? Noreen, any questions? All right, so at this.
One thing, if we could have the presentation submitted, it's always a good idea, so it's outlined.
All right, so at this time, I'll turn it to the public. Any questions, comments, concerns regarding this project? Sir, if you'd like to come up to the podium, please state your name and address for the record, and let us know if you're in favor or opposition, or you might just simply have a question about the project.
Sure. Thank you. I'm Louis Stern, and I'm the president of the Sipawishit Place Homeowners Corporation. We have 41 homes across the marsh and the bikeway from the campground. I originally sent a letter of concern and opposition, but having talked with everyone here, they've been extremely responsive, and we are very much supportive.
And just for the record, are you speaking in your capacity with
Yes.
your organization?
Yes.
Great, okay.
So we do have several things left that I just want to clarify. I'll put them on the table. I came with 22, I only have 8 left. Thank you. The first is, originally there was discussion about the nightly rate being a little bit exorbitant. Exorbitant just from a campground perspective of $375 a night, was discussed at the planning board meeting. I know they're saying it's going to be affordable. The question is, what's affordable from everyone's perspective? So $150 to $200 feels affordable. $300, $400 doesn't sound affordable. So one question is, what is affordable and what are the plans? The second one is, right now, the neighbors across from the campground have access to the bikeway through the campground. And that's very important. Otherwise, you have to go on the dangerous road around, down to get onto the bikeway. And so the concern is, will there continue to be access to the bikeway through the campground for the neighbors? I know there was issue about, you'll always have a phone number to call, but having called phone numbers and getting a lot of call machines or voicemail or whatever it is, and if you have a concern about something right there, it's nice to have someone right there so that you can talk to them. They can go immediately, you don't have to wait. That's especially both for the construction and after the construction, during the management. The next one is, we've talked with them about, since as neighbors, all the neighbors right now, the major groups make contributions to the Phragmites control in Little Sipperisset Marsh. They expressed an interest and a willingness to do that. I'd like to just put that on the table, as well as perhaps a contribution to the Shining Sea Bikeway. It's a very costly thing to maintain. As a neighbor, it would be good to do that as well. Next is, we talked about, and they agreed that it would be really nice to stay in touch with the neighbors, both during the construction and during the operation. And we'd like to arrange that there be some kind of regular meetings with the neighbors, perhaps a couple times a year, whatever's appropriate. There's a concern on some people's part that the wastewater treatment, the pumps would be loud. It's right on the marsh, and the concern is that sound travels a great deal over the marsh. So we'd like to know about the decibel level of the pumps. And there was a question raised, and a response said that they will get information about the taxes to be paid to the town. The question is, what is the financial impact to the town? How are taxes and what kind of taxes would be paid? And finally, there is a concern. We've had a variety of construction sites right on the marsh recently, and no matter what time the construction people say they're going to start, somehow the construction workers end up showing up 45 minutes early. If you say 7:30, 7 o'clock, it starts at 6:30. We'd like to set 7 o'clock as opposed to 7:30, 7:30 as opposed to 7, hoping that they might actually show at that time. That is all. Otherwise, again, I reemphasize, we think this is the best use of the property, and thank you very much.
Could I ask just a
Thank you.
follow-up question?
Sure.
You mentioned that you've had bikeway access. Can you show approximately where there is in the plan, and is that deeded at all, or is there?
Can you talk about that?
It's not deeded, so it was
Oh,
arbitrary
if-
determined by.
Just for the, everyone at home, we usually ask everyone to come up to the podium.
Hello, I'm Kate Eldred, 5 Catchalot Lane, across the street from the existing campground. And the access was patchy. We supposedly had permission, but a summer employee at the gate would turn us away periodically. So we would like to have that kind of made clearer.
How was that access before? You entering it from Palmer Ave through, or?
We do. If you see on the plan, Catchalot Lane is just right across from the gate. And if you go in the gate and then you kind of cut to the right, you circle around and come out on the bike path. And we're very aware that if you've got people paying for their privacy and their camping, they don't want just everybody tramping through the campground. I totally get that. But as neighbors across the street and all around there, it's very dangerous otherwise. We've been doing it, but it's very dangerous. Can I go on? I had one more question. Are you done, Lou?
Am I done?
I have another question for you.
Yes, sir.
Well, you're aware that the number of things you're asking for are well beyond the authority of this board.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But I'm
It was
also
for
well,
years.
and I'm well aware that they want to do more than what's required. They want to do what's neighborly and conducive to the environment and a good family campground. So that's why I put it on the table.
Thank you. Ma'am, did you have any
Yes.
additional questions?
Yes, mine is also probably beyond the purview of this board, but it was something that I've been curious about, which is when you have a campground on Cape Cod, and particularly when you're restoring a wetland, mosquitoes are going to be a problem, and already ticks are a problem. And as someone who's concerned about the quality of the drinking water and want things as natural as possible, I was just wondering if we could address what they're planning to do about tick, mosquito control, and so on. Just for the record. Okay?
And typically during public comment, we just allow everyone to voice their opinions, and then if the applicant wishes to address them, we typically allow you to do that. So does anyone else have any questions, comments, concerns regarding this project? Members of the public, anyone? Okay.
Jason Brown again for Blue Flag. Lou and Kate, really appreciate the comments and all the interaction that we've had. We are more than happy to sit down right after this yet again and address each one of those questions directly with you. So it's outside of this comment, but we absolutely hear you, and our intent is to be as good neighbors and good impact on Falmouth as we possibly can be.
Any members of the board, any follow-up questions for the applicant right now?
Applicant have anything else to respond to some of the questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As one of your board members mentioned, many of the items that were raised are really outside of the purview of this board. I think one that probably is within the purview of the board is the noise and pumps. So maybe I'll ask Brendan if he wants to, can you respond to that?
So, you know, all of the wastewater components in that area are subsurface. As deep as, 6 feet below the ground is what we're asking for, just based on the grades. The whole system is a gravity collection system, and in order to work properly, we have to request a bit of relief, but that's going to be at the Board of Health Monday night. The pumps, if you're standing right next to it, you'd know they were there, but in terms of an actual decibel level, I don't have that information with me. I'd be more than happy to get that information and provide that to anyone in the neighborhood. But we would, be happy to further address that Monday with the Board of Health as well. But I don't have an actual number I can provide at this time in terms of decibel level.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note, though, that they are housed within a structure, and the structure either is going to be a concrete structure or a wood frame structure with a foam insulation. So there's going to be sound efficacy barriers within the structure itself.
Is there anything else you'd like to address?
No, I mean, we're anxious to move forward and continue this process along. I don't know what the board's inclination this evening. It sounds like you may not act. We'd obviously like you to move forward as quickly as you can. There's nothing I see in your bylaw that prevents you from acting. So I guess we wanted to have a chat about next steps and process with all of you.
Sure, and typically it's not exactly official policy of the board, but usually if a project is also under the purview of the planning board, we wait for the planning board to close their matter and issue a site plan review before we formally act on it.
Okay.
So we may be looking at a continuation in terms of our proceedings.
Does the board ever, just a question, vote and then have as a condition the site plan review process?
That's typically what we do once we actually vote upon it.
But not prior to the planning board acting?
Typically not.
And that would be the same for Concom, depending on what their initial review is, that would like to see their order of conditions or notice of impact, whatever it is.
So we have, timeframes that we're trying to be cognizant of. My clients have this property under agreement. In terms of Conservation Commission, I would just note that there's not much use happening within the buffer, and in fact, it's actually less of a use and impact in the buffer than currently existing. So the applications that are before this board, the special permits for the parking lot surface, not within the impact of Conservation Commission.
About the mosquito control and things like that.
Again,
Herbicides. I mean, I
those
don't
will
know.
all be addressed at the Conservation Commission.
Okay.
Do you want to have any board discussion? I mean, we've normally waited for the other departments, and I know that we just got the landscaping and planning yesterday.
They haven't had a chance to look at it.
So we would need time anyways to just review the plans that were there and what's here for tonight.
Right.
I think I'd like at least a minor continuation, assuming the planning board's gonna come through with conditions. Board of Health is gonna do what they're gonna do, and very rarely do we ever say, no, we want a lower nitrogen limit. And we can see what the reaction is to the initial Concom. So I guess a continuation of whatever, 2 weeks or whatever we have available.
Well, what's the anticipated timeframe for planning, do you know?
So we're back before them next Tuesday. We've already had one public hearing. This would be the second
So you
hearing.
think they'll probably
We're hopeful.
render a decision?
We're hopeful.
Because look, obviously, it's an excellent project, and thinking about what could go there, we're pretty lucky you came along, frankly. So I think we want to approve, but we want to approve it in a way that's consistent with all the other board decisions, so. I agree with the rest of the board, we should wait and see what.
What's our next possible date? Is it like the 21st of March, or?
Looks like the 21st is, Noreen?
Yes.
Is it the 21st?
I might not, I don't know if you care, but I might not be here on that day.
Our next scheduled hearing after that is March 7th, but that is,
We can't do 7th.
that's filled to capacity, let's say.
So it's March 21st. You can't be there, Ken? You,
Today's February 21st.
I'm sorry, no,
March.
speak.
so what's the
Seventh.
date?
Yeah, I thought you were talking about March 21.
No.
March 21.
We are March
Yeah,
21.
March 21.
Yeah, that's available.
March 21?
I think by then, everything will be wrapped up with this thing.
Oh, we might, yeah, have initial feedback,
Right.
see what the papers write about.
If the board isn't able to take us early, we want to get on as soon as we can. So the next available meeting.
Well,
would ask
I
for
would
the
be happy to
continuance.
make a motion that we continue this till March 21,
Second.
6:30 here in Town Hall.
Before we do that, is there any outstanding matters that you'd like the applicant to address at the next meeting, or is this really just contingent upon planning board and the other?
Well, I like to see the other boards, but would it be possible to get any kind of a management plan? I mean,
Yeah,
just
that's my
to
biggest-
get more of an idea on these hours.
Like an
and-
operational management?
Yeah, just to give an idea what the hours are, general.
I think my biggest concern is the on-site management, especially if you're not gonna be, well, if you're not gonna be completely seasonal, how do you deal with things in the middle of winter? Yeah.
In addition to 911.
Absolutely. There's always that. Okay.
All right, so,
Did you want to speak or not to the bike access? Is a little bit out of purview and might have liability issues.
I think it's all out of our purview. I don't
yeah,
think,
it's all,
Yeah.
I'd rather stay out of that one if,
Well, you raised it.
well, but it's not deeded.
Oh, you mean bike
It's not
access for
deeded,
the
yeah.
neighbors?
If it's not
Yes.
deeded, then,
Bike access, if you don't want to answer it, you don't have to.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you heard my clients. They want to be good neighbors. They realize this is not a matter before the zoning board. They will continue to engage in discussions with their
Very good,
neighbors.
okay.
all right. So Ken, I think I interrupted you in the middle
No,
of the motion.
you heard my motion. It
Okay.
was,
I'll second his motion.
Continue here in Town Hall, March 21, 6:30.
All right, so motion was made by Ken and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll be
Delete that, it's gonna be on there.
Yeah.
we'll be taking a 5-minute break. Thank you. have for tonight is 3-19 Murphy, 386 Mara Vista Avenue in T-Ticket.
Being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11, Chapter 40 of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that Patricia A. Murphy of T-Ticket, Mass. applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit pursuant to Sections 243C of the Code of Falmouth to remove portion of existing deck and to construct a three-season room that, with a roof deck to the pre-existing non-conforming single-family dwelling, subject property known as 386 Mara Vista Avenue, T-Ticket, Mass.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Terrence Quinn.
Sorry, Mr. Quinn, we still need to read in the referrals, but just a second.
From the Health Department, its only comment is it's on the sewer. DPW, the Public Works people, standard comments. Concom, all work to be done in a flood zone, AE 12. Project was given approval under conditions, administrative review. And Water Department's on an existing service, 1-inch service line. That's it.
Mr.
Evening.
Quinn?
Hi, my name is Terrence Quinn. I'm representing Mrs. Murphy on this project. As you can see, we're actually reducing the lot coverage quite a bit. Existing is 1,893.2 square feet, which is 26.29%, and proposed it will be reduced to 1,685.5 square feet, which is a reduction to 23.41%. I also got the recommendation that we will put a dry well system to catch all the rainwater off the rear sections of the house also.
Okay. And would you like to turn it to board questions if you're all set, or?
Sure.
Okay. Jerry, do you want to start us off?
No questions.
Okay. Ken, any questions?
Well, I guess it's pretty clear.
Ed, anything?
No questions, just a comment. There's no number on the street, number on the house.
Is this on the front of the house? Yes, there is. It's, yeah, there's 386 big brass numbers. I know I put them on.
I didn't notice it. No, other than that, I have no questions. Pretty straightforward.
Just one question, but there's no access then to get in the house from the rooftop deck? You have to,
No, you'll have to come down the stairs.
Okay. And just regarding the engineering referral, which you mentioned, the dry wells, said you're amenable to installing them. Typically, as far as our decisions go, as a condition, we just leave it to the discretion of the applicant's engineer, which I'm sure you'd be amenable to.
Yeah.
Okay. And any other questions from the board?
Pretty straightforward.
Okay. Any members of the public have any questions, comments, concerns regarding this project? Seeing none, how would the board like to proceed?
Motion to close the hearing.
Second.
Motion closed by Jerry and second by Ken. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. That goes relatively straightforward. Would anyone like to make another motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'm happy to second that as well.
All right, moving on to findings.
It's not substantially more detrimental under 240-3C. It should meet the requirements, 240, 216, adequacy of site, suitability, impact on traffic flow, impact on neighborhood, adequacy of sewage disposal, which will be tying into public sewer, and adequacy of utilities and other public services.
All right. Anything else?
I think it's an improvement.
Sure. Enhances the utilization of the,
Well, they're reducing
property
lot
for the
coverage
property
Oh,
owner.
yes, it's,
And they are reducing lot coverage.
from 26 to 23. It's pretty significant.
It is, especially in that area of town.
Can we condition, just per engineering comments that we have in file and remarks?
Sure, we'll make a finding about the engineering.
Yeah, we can actually date I think it's February 8th.
oh, that would be a condition, right? When we
Yeah.
get to conditions.
Well, we at least need to make a finding to support a condition, so I just wanted to have
So
a
the fin- yeah,
finding.
So they said they would comply, but I'd like to.
Dated February 8th.
Sure. And it included the standard comments with their recommendation of a dry well, which the applicant stated that they were amenable to. Anything else for findings? All right, conditions
The plans.
Like the drawings.
per plans and regarding the engineering. and
Remarks
the-
from February 8th.
Sure. And that the applicant's engineer will find suitable areas for the dry wells. All right, so I think that does it for findings and conditions, unless anyone else has any other.
Nope.
Okay. Motion to approve was made by Jerry and second by Ken. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, and up next, we have application 4-19, D Federico, 11 Plymouth Drive in East Falmouth.
Being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11, Chapter 48 of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that Jason W. and Christine D. Federico of Charlestown, Mass. applied to the zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit to Section 240-69E of the Code of Falmouth to raise and reconstruct single-family dwelling, increasing lot coverage by structures over 20% on subject property known as 11 Plymouth Drive, East Falmouth, Mass. Board of Health, current home, 2 bedrooms, proposed home, 4. Relabeled. One bonus room that meets the definitions of a bedroom under the Title V sewer work test done 1/30/19. The plans not provided at the time of the referral. Engineering, standard comments, water runoff, et cetera. That's it.
Okay, for the applicant?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, pardon me, members of the board. For the record, my name is Kevin Clower. I'm an attorney with Ament Clower Law Firm here in Falmouth, and I represent the applicants, Jason and Christine Di Federico. Mr. Di Federico is here with us in the audience this evening, as well as the builder, Anthony LaRusso, and my colleague, Matthew Terry, which is all of the audience, I think, at this point. Mr. Di Federico and his wife are seeking a permit to raise and rebuild the existing single-family dwelling on the property. This property, 11 Plymouth Drive, is on a lot of 7,986 square feet. It's located in the residential C zoning district, in the Seacoast Shores area of East Falmouth. The existing structure on the lot is a one-story, single-family structure with 2 bedrooms and a footprint of slightly less than 800 square feet. The height is approximately 16 feet. The DeFedericos have recently purchased this property as a second home for their growing family. They're seeking to raise and rebuild the house in order to better accommodate that family, to improve the usefulness and the aesthetics as well. What they're proposing is a new single-family dwelling, which will conform to all zoning regulations. There will be 4 bedrooms, and as was noted in the Board of Health referral, there were 3 actual bedrooms, and then there's a bonus room, which technically speaking falls within the Title V definition of a bedroom. So they are proposing a new 4-bedroom Title V system for the property as well, which will replace the existing failed cesspool, actually. The proposed ridge height is 29 feet 1 inches. There is an attached garage, and the lot coverage by structure for the proposed dwelling will be 22.3% lot coverage. At 22.3% lot coverage, this does require a special permit from this board under section 240-69E, which says that this board may grant a special permit for lot coverage of greater than 20% but less than 25%. And in doing so, you're asked to consider the size and height of the structure in relation to the size and height of structures in the neighborhood, the effect of shadow on adjacent properties, the impact on views and vistas, and the effect of nitrogen on coastal embayments. As to the size and height of the structure, the bylaw does not define what that size is or what dimensions would be used for, but this board has typically considered gross building area. So we put together a spreadsheet taken from the assessor's records. That spreadsheet looks at the 49 properties within a 300-foot radius of this and lists out the lot size, the footprint, and the gross building areas of those homes. Of those, there are 8 with larger footprints and there are 13 with larger gross building areas. It's certainly not out of character with the neighborhood around it. With regards to shadow, there's going to be little impact on adjacent properties, largely due to the considerable distance between the buildings. To the east, the nearest dwelling is about 80 feet. To the south, there are 2 at 97 feet and 65 feet approximately. And the nearest dwelling is to the west, and that's approximately 40 feet. But that building is of a very similar design and scale, and it's actually built and designed by the same team that is building and designing this house here. There's no real impact on views and vistas. This is an already heavily developed street, and this will be in line with the nearby properties. As I mentioned, the abutting property at 9 Plymouth was built and designed by the same team and has a ridge height of 32 feet, which is higher than we'll actually be seeking. It's also worth noting that the regulations really consider views and vistas from public ways, and being that this isn't sort of in the way of any views from the public way, there's no real impact and certainly no negative impact. With regards to nitrogen, there is no, there's a benefit. There's no negative effect because we are replacing the existing failed system with a new Title V. I think it's worth noting that the difference between what's allowed by right at 20% and what we're seeking the special permit for at 22.3% is only 185 square feet. It's a relatively minor increase over what would be allowed by right. There were some engineering comments that we have responded to. I submitted the new plan electronically today. I do have hard copies now that I can submit. Very minor changes, but what we're looking at here is the revised plan, and it added downspouts and a recharge area for rainwater mitigation, and also added a yard drain off the driveway in order to address any potential runoff on the driveway. It's also important to note that this proposed driveway is a pervious driveway, so it's not pavement, so there's going to be decreased runoff. It's not going to have the same amount of runoff as a paved driveway otherwise would. I will submit those.
Thank you. Thank you.
In sum, when you take into account what the board's supposed to be considering with this application, The size and height of the structure is in character with the other structures in the neighborhood. There's no appreciable effect of shadow on adjacent properties. There's no negative impact on views and vistas. There's no negative effect of the nitrogen, and actually a substantial benefit, and it meets the standards of 240-216. There are no detriments to this project, and there's certainly no detriments that could outweigh the substantial benefits, substantially outweigh the benefits as is required under 240-216. For these reasons, and given these considerations, I'd be happy to address any questions the board may have, but I believe that you should be granting a special permit.
Thank you, Attorney Clower. Bob, do you want to start us off?
No questions.
Ed, any questions?
No, pretty straightforward.
Ken?
So the exceedance of lot coverage is largely due to the deck, is that?
It's actually largely due to the garage. There's no existing
I
garage.
guess I'm looking at the existing house.
Yeah, so if you, the existing lot, so if you look at the plan, the existing is on the left, the proposed is on the right. The existing is below lot coverage, I think it's just over 9%. But really what drives the need for the special permit is the garage. The garage is slightly under 400 square feet. But without that, you know, I think it adds a real aesthetic character to the house, but also keeps the cars contained, keeps anything else contained within the structure. But that is really the driving force for the lot coverage.
And the building height?
29 feet 1 inch.
Right. Those are my two questions.
No
Sure.
questions?
Attorney Clower, I believe the Board of Health referral mentioned the bonus room that would qualify as a bedroom. Can you address that?
Sure. So as I mentioned, there are 3 designated bedrooms and 1 bonus room, and we are going to be placing a new 4-bedroom septic system. So that'll be, that'll be addressed by that. But we also have the plans, which were just finalized with the 4-bedroom system. We will, of course, be obtaining Board of Health approval for that system. But we will have the capacity to address both the bonus room and the designated bedrooms.
And the, just for the record, I guess the proposed garage, that's a 1-car garage.
Correct.
And permeable surface, do you know what that's going to be?
Shell.
All right, that does it for me. Anyone else have any follow-up questions?
Follow-up question.
Sure.
You're actually applying, well, what are you applying for? A 4-bedroom or a 3-bedroom?
It's a 4-bedroom system.
So that's, you're applying for 4-bedroom?
For this?
Yes.
Yeah, I said it was going to be a 4-bedroom home, 3 designated bedrooms with a bonus room, but that bonus room falls within the Title V definition of a bedroom.
Okay. It's 4-bedroom, so. You don't want to come back here later?
No. Well, I'll be back here later, but they don't want to be back here later.
All set, Jerry?
Yes.
All right. Any members of the public have any questions, comments, concerns regarding this project? Anyone who's not part of this application? All right, seeing none, back to the board. What would be the board's pleasure?
Motion to close.
Second.
Moved to close by Jerry and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
And how would we like to proceed?
Motion to approve.
Move to approve by Bob. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ed. Moving on to findings.
House proposes a 3-bedroom with a bonus room that qualifies as a bedroom, so they'll be putting in a 4-bedroom Title V septic system. The large change in the percentage for structure is due to the garage. At 22.3, it's under the maximum allowed.
Be an improvement to the neighborhood.
Not more substantially detrimental. It meets 240-216.
At least 4 other homes in the neighborhood that have lot coverage larger.
8.
8? Larger than 22?
Oh, there's 8, I'm sorry, there's 8 over 20.
Yeah. 4 larger than 22.3.
Applicants amenable to the engineering comments. increases utilization.
Proposed height is 29 feet, I think, which is below the maximum. Any other findings?
I guess they're conforming to the various setbacks, right?
We will be using permeable surface for the driveway shell.
All right, anything else for findings? Moving on to conditions.
For plans,
And revised plan that was just submitted.
yep, revised plans.
For revised plans received tonight.
I'd also like to include again the condition on the engineering comments of 2/8/19.
All right,
And they also asked that a house number be posted.
Oh, he said it was, no, that was a different one.
No, this one too.
Was it?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
This is a tear down, isn't it?
No, but when they put it up,
Yeah.
it's
That's a
clearly
building.
on the street.
Department requirement.
It turns out building department doesn't always go to engineering, that's why I'm adding them in there.
I like it. Bootstrapping it, but that's okay. Anything else?
I think that's it.
All right,
Common sense.
motion to approve was made by Bob and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, moving on to our open meeting agenda items. We have the minutes from January 31st and February 7th. I think we had to table these last time because perhaps it was a quorum issue, if I remember correctly.
Not there on the 31st, I know that.
We didn't, I think we didn't have enough
Didn't have
time
a
to
chance to read
review them.
We didn't have
before.
enough time to review. There you go. So
Motion
that's
to approve.
motion, well, we'll take one day at a time here. So motion to approve.
One day at a time.
All right.
January 31st and then February 2nd.
All right, move to approve January 31st first. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
And one abstention.
I wasn't here, I don't think, on the 31st.
Motion to approve minutes of February 7th, 2019.
I don't think I was here on the 7th.
No.
Still getting out of the hospital.
All right, so move to approve made by Jerry, and is there a second?
Second.
Second by Bob. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, with
I
one
wasn't here.
abstention being Ed. All right. All set with that. Up second on the list is board updates. Any board updates at all?
I guess just that these guys,
We don't know.
oh, we don't know.
We,
So, we're waiting for verification.
right, so the selectmen did, they were perhaps too successful in appointing both Bob and Jerry, but pending comments from town council, pending further review, we shall see what the result of that was.
I guess the only question I have is Mark willing to be considered as a associate?
Perhaps he is.
You might,
They gotta
I don't know,
advertise.
it was very quick.
Well, if they advertise the second one as to fill 2 vacancies and an alternate,
They've never advertised this
The second one.
second one for this.
well, I think that was the point.
Right.
So I think it's all in the advertisement so we could get another member.
We'll leave that up to the town charter.
Well, I
And
think
town
sometimes we
council.
can make suggestions.
All right.
I would, I guess that's maybe that's the important part, is that we should make sure they understand what is needed.
Yeah.
I conveyed that to town manager, the selectmen, and my comments were forwarded to town council. Town council informed me that he was going to review the situation, but operating as we are currently. So Bob and Jerry are still both alternate members.
And I did
Because they
comment,
haven't received their appointments and they have not been sworn in yet, so we're operating under the status quo.
did let them know that night anyways, that when we do have vacancies that come up, even in alternate positions, that they really need to move as fast as possible to
Right, I
fill.
mean, we have 2 vacancies,
Right.
in addition to the fact that
But we knew about
you're
the,
alternates and you don't want to be alternates.
we knew about the first one in the 8th of October.
I
So
know.
October, November,
They
December,
didn't-
January,
They didn't file
February.
it till late, and then they
Yeah.
closed it, and then they just never,
Right.
They have a history of doing that.
yep.
Okay.
Either way, there'll be
Somebody.
somebody, and there'll also be open positions
Right.
regardless of the outcome, so. We'll see what happens.
And it would be nice to get, I don't know, when openings are around, it would be nice to have some women apply for the board. I mean, right now, we're an all-male board, it'd be kind of nice to have a.
I agree.
So you running for select?
No. I can guarantee that right now. I'm not running for somebody.
All right, so if that does it for board updates, date for a future workshop, we'll put that on.
You know, I guess maybe just one comment, because that's the reason I was putting the engineering comments in the conditions, because it's come to my attention that the building department doesn't really refer to engineering when we do these projects.
Right.
So even though we've been putting them in our decisions, because we haven't specifically referenced our remarks in the file that they must comply, that in many cases they aren't.
In terms, so this usually manifests.
In building department, you know.
Right, but I'm thinking it's probably usually whether there's a, a subsurface water.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's happening is, and it might be because of workload, that building department is not reviewing the zoning decisions. And then if something comes up after the fact, and now they go look at it, but they've already given their occupancies and permits and haven't complied, it could be an issue. So just for us, it's probably better off just to include them in the conditions. We're covered either way. And then if somebody has an outside case, then they can at least base on what the approvals were for.
Like I briefly mentioned during that application, it's a bit of a bootstrapping situation, but I think it's warranted, so. We could proceed that way on future applications.
Yeah, we just have to know, like they said, that we just have to refer to the date that's actually submitted on our referral in the file.
That gets it to a right piece of paper.
Right.
Yeah.
Most importantly.
Hmm.
All right, so anything else for board updates?
Mhm.
Okay, date for a future workshop, we'll table that, just pending the outcome, see how,
We'll see how many people we can get. Maybe
the
we can- maybe we
see
could
how the
get-
composition of the board fills out. And board discussion regarding the zoning recodification committee. Forgive me, Noreen, I don't have
You need
my,
to appoint
we need to appoint.
2 people to the zoning recodification, which is coming up in March.
Coming up in March. Do we have a solid date for that yet in time? I know that was
It
a
was like the
fluid.
6th or 7th.
So did they do the extension on the time? So it's not,
Yeah, that was a bit of a fluid situation there, but I think they agreed at least pushing back the initial time that was stated. I think they were thinking more 4:35-ish, was
I think they
it?
were looking at 5.
5?
5 or 5:30.
It's more doable.
I mean, I'd like to be considered if, unless someone else,
I think,
in addition.
I think yourself and I think Bob had expressed interest as well as yourself.
And I was hoping to be involved myself, but depending on scheduling work time, that's not always guaranteed. I could always try my best to be there, but again, that's up to my supervisor and other powers that be. So,
plus you could always observe if you.
that's true, like I've done,
Observations
like
are
I've done in
allowed.
the past, in the event that I can pull it off, I can just observe, which would be good. So just out of an abundance of caution with my own schedule and Bob and Jerry's willingness to be on this committee, or whatever the name might be, I know they're careful with the terminology there. And if it is up to me to appoint them, I'll gladly appoint you both to that. If Ed and Ken aren't interested.
I'm happy to have Jerry and Bob on it.
Fantastic. All right, so Congratulations, our new 2 members to the zoning recodification committee.
Good luck.
Or
Good.
working group, we'll see what happens.
Working group, that's why I was trying to be careful with the term there, whatever it might be called.
Free labor.
Congratulations, you 2 are on it. Future agenda items, are there anything at all to consider?
I think it's mostly for the workshop, right? You know, you had mentioned about codifying and putting the Mellon report in our procedures. That'd probably be a discussion. Or the procedures for following the Mellon report. Though we don't have to, it'd be nice to include that in our procedures, about telephone call-in for at least 1 meeting.
Right.
Does the Board of Selectmen know that they could be advertising for 2 positions for alternates
Well, that was,
Well,
today?
Well,
officially, right now,
I think
they
Noreen
may
can
only,
tell 'em.
I don't know, they may only be able to advertise one.
One,
It depends on what,
They ought to get on with it.
I mean, according to the charter, you have to do the advertising, but maybe,
well, how about this? As soon as town council figures out the situation with the appointments from past Monday night, I'll relay information to the Board of Selectmen and town manager to post those, whatever
no, you
positions
could
are
say,
available.
you could say as soon as
As-
anyone is
as
sworn
soon
into
as
the
possible.
position, that they immediately
Yeah.
advertise
Right.
an opening.
Still
I think they could
another month or
advertise it
2 to go.
beforehand, myself.
They can't, because we're still in the positions.
Nah, that's all wording. Good lawyers pick 'em up, subject to a
Town chart,
vacancy.
town chart is weird, though, that charter group, the town chart is very specific.
oh, you're worried that because you guys are already alternates, you can't advertise for alternates until you get appointed to be,
That's what, well, it says that whatever
They-
opening happens, they have to advertise it for so many days and then close. And then
Oh.
once it's closed, they can fill the position, but they can't fill a position if you haven't advertised the position.
but they
well,
could
that of course makes sense.
I mean, they could
And that's the
advertise.
issue, so-
They could advertise.
But the question,
Fill it by us, and
Question
that
is
same
one-
day,
one-
it's
Can they
filled,
advertise- there's 4
appoint the
there's
alternates.
4 potential openings,
Yeah,
right? 2 alternates, 2 not-alternates. Can they advertise for all of them?
I think they can, and they just can't fill the alternates unless the,
Because either, so the problem is if they then
you have to resign,
choose,
yeah, you'd have to, that's the problem.
if they then choose 2 people, not you, to be the regular members, then they can't fill
They may
the
figure out that we
alternates.
can both be appointed now, that might come out.
Well, that's
that
what
way.
they had said
Or if they
before.
say it's only one, then the next one will just have to go to the next.
I think we're
appointment
making it
meeting.
overly complicated.
Well, I don't know. Anyway,
It's in town council's
above
hands.
my pay grade.
Yeah, let town council handle it.
They'll figure it out. I have full faith in them. All right, so any future agenda items? Seeing none, our next meeting will be March 7th, 6:30 at the Herman Meeting Room due to anticipated increased
Interest.
interest. So,
And we don't have an executive session before that, right?
we do not.
We have just 2 40Bs that night?
One.
One.
Or 1 40B plus the dome.
Correct.
So with that having been said,
But we're gonna actually meet in that room.
we will meet in that room, absolutely. Herman Meeting Room, 6:30, March 7th. Be there.
You're as a student, or you?
Be there, be square.
Enterprise.
She's the enterprise
Meeting
reporter.
adjourned.
Oh,